everyone to today's webinar. This is the Realizeit webinar series. My name is Ty Roberts with Realizeit. I oversee business development and strategy for Realizeit, and we're very excited for today's webinar. So there will be people logging in since we're getting started here at the top of the hour. But today's webinar is a presentation that we're very excited about. Our presenter and guest today is Cristi Ford, Associate Vice Provost from the University of Maryland University College, and he oversees the Center for Innovation in Learning and Student Success. And Realizeit has had the good fortune of working with Cristi and her team over the last couple of years. And today's topic, as we know, is applying design-based research to academic innovation. And Cristi will be talking and kind of using Realizeit as one of the initiatives at UMUC as a bit of a, as we say, a body on the table look at. So I'm going to give a little bit of housekeeping right now, and then I'm going to turn it over to Cristi for some simple housekeeping. This is meant to be a 30-minute format for Cristi to share with us today. We encourage you to submit questions at any point. Use the chat function, or you can use the Q&A function, and we will log all of your questions. When Cristi wraps up after 30 minutes or so, I will then share those questions with Cristi. I will pose them to her. All the attendees are on mute for the sake of the webinar, and we are recording this as well, so that will be provided as a follow-up to this. I can see we've got quite a folks that have just joined in the last minute. I'm going to turn it over to Cristi. And Cristi, if you can hear me, you are free to take it from here.
Thanks, Pat, for the introduction. Good morning or good afternoon, all. I'm really excited to be able to spend a little time with you today, to be able to converse with you a little bit about DBR, design-based research. As Ty mentioned, my name is Cristi Ford. I serve as AVP here at UMUC, but I've also had many other hats. Being a faculty member, I serve as a Middle States Accreditation peer reviewer, and like many of you, have lots of previous online experience teaching the online environment as well as building online courses. And so this is the context that I will bring through as we talk today about this approach. Background around UMUC, for those of you who may not be familiar with UMUC, UMUC was established in 1947, and its goal was to educate our returning GIs from World War II. Since then, we've evolved into a worldwide open access university that has focused on the unique needs of adult learners. Our classes are taught primarily online, and we have over 85,000 students enroll each year. 75% of our students have full-time jobs. The average age of our students is 32, and 54% of our students are working parents. So just the center and how we came to be. I've been in the center that I refer to as CILSS going forward, the Center for Innovation in Learning and Student Success, for a couple of years now. In 2013, our president, Javier Miyares, and Provost Maricini at the time wanted to create a laboratory for continuous improvement to stop the university's instruction of curriculum, learning models, and student support. And we are very keen in leveraging technology and pedagogical approaches in innovative ways. That's really a key central focus of our work. So we serve as a research and development arm for the university, and we provide innovation ideas and breakthroughs in learning. And so we have the opportunity here to be able to do a lot of action-based, applied-based research in the center. I recently did an EdTech Efficacy Research Symposium in D.C., and it reminded me that as I gave you all this talk today, or shared some of my knowledge with you around this topic, I wanted to start with our philosophy in CILSS. We believe it's first important to start by being clear about the problem you're trying to solve. and room for iterations. I quote from a recent blog posting that was a follow-up from this group, the research symposium that I attended. And what I think is important to notice about the quote is that there is always data, but it's important to make sure that you know what you're measuring, and make sure that you have the right data to be able to measure that. You know that by knowing from the onset, so knowing from the very beginning what the problem you're trying to solve, and creating evaluation plans prior to implementation. This innovation work that many of us do is really a commitment, and it takes time to be able to do that. And so to talk with you about DBR, design-based research today, I want to offer this framework to you as an opportunity to change the conversation about how academic innovation works at your campus and it happens. It's more than just saying with this approach that innovation takes time, but allows you a really consistent framework to talk about what those cycles actually look like and what it means. So let's talk about design-based research, or DBR. And Alan Collins in '92 introduced the concept of designing experiments as a formative research for designing, evaluating, refining, and implementing teaching and learning interventions into ordinary classroom settings. You know, the opportunities are laboratories as opposed to the controlled laboratory environment. DBR is not so much a precise methodology, but it is a collaborative approach that engages both the researchers and the practitioners in an iterative process, systematically analyzing, designing, and evaluating educational innovations aimed at solving complex real-world educational problems. With understanding and documenting how and why the design, intervention, or innovation works in practice. It's thematic, it's interventionist, it's collaborative, and it's really multidisciplinary in its approach. And I'll share with you some of the things that we do here at UMUC that follow this framework. These involve problem identification, assessment, and analysis in an applied educational setting, along with the implementation and evaluation of some type of change or intervention to address the problem. It's very different from action research, and action research is typically performed by the teaching professional with the goal of improving their own practice. With DBR, it's a collaborative partnership with a research and design team, and we'll be able to demonstrate what we hear at UMUC and some of the work with Realizeit. So it's really, shifting the thoughtfulness around being a researcher and being the practitioner to being more collaborative. And I think this approach has been very effective for us as we've done our innovation work at UMUC. I think for you to consider is that implementation at scale, as you all know, requires great consideration for how new innovation variables of the pilot may interact or conflict with variables in your university environment. Exist policies, curriculum, assessment methods, or even faculty. Our faculty and their willingness to be able to the innovation or change. That work in a controlled setting or on a small scale have often failed as they go out to be scaled out due to variations and the adaptations at the system and classroom level. An extension of that, I'll talk through how we've determined how many iterations we have within a cycle, but there's also some flexibility if you look at the DBR research, how you come to a sense of knowing when it is that you need to stop. Our research focuses, extends the identification and design of organizational routines and processes that support collaborative design and productive adaptive core principles across the settings. I think this is really key because there's a lot of times that we do things in isolation or pilots, but you have to think thoroughly moving forward to what's going to happen when this is successful. What are the parameters that need to be in place when we're ready to scale? So this diagram that I've created here at UMUC to talk about our phases and our approach to DBR and innovation work we do in CILSS. You'll see in the very first box, you'll see the problem in context. So we're moving from, at the bottom, you'll see phases. We're moving from problem identification all the way along the continuum to problem resolution and advancing the theory. It's important to notice here, as you look at my first box, you see that we have many different team members. It's really about taking the innovation work they're doing out of isolation or siloing it and making sure it's a collaborative approach, as I talked about the DBR Framework. Moving along the continuum, we're looking at what research, what literature review can we review, what collaboratives have we had conversations with other institutions, what have practitioners told us in terms of feasibility around solving the problem. All of those conversations have to happen before we decide what our tentative piloting approach and our tentative piloting design is. A little bit more about this group, but the Learning Design and Solutions group here at UMUC has been really critical to our work. Specifically, get ready to create new pilots and opportunities. We oftentimes look at maybe 1 or 2 or 3 different prototype approaches so that we can present the collective team with a couple different scenarios and how those scenarios would be implemented. And so it takes a team approach to be able to go through this and about all of the different types of work. I think the other thing I'd like to mention about this slide is that DBR, this design-based research, attempts to progressively, dynamically generate, which is exploratory research, improve, which we know is constructive research, and then learn about, which is the empirical research. So we'll talk about how we move through those phases, which in contrast to experimental research, the context variables of DBR are seen as providing the resources through which theoretical expected learning processes become realized in specific learning situations. So we're using the variables in DBR to be able to help us design the next version of the iteration. So the difference, as you will see noted here, this is our framework. DBR, as opposed to other types of educational research, which typically involve a single cycle of data collection and analysis, focus on producing knowledge. So if you're in the center of my slide, you'll see it says design research. We start with a very specific learning science principle. So we have global design, specific learning design principles from our instructional designers to be able to create those approaches. To you before, specifically in this example that I'm going to talk to you about with Realizeit, we create 2 prototypes, prototype 1 and prototype 2. We designed principles based on what we heard from the practitioners. We presented those prototypes to the entire team and a decision on the best use case. From there, we then completed the pilot product and we put that pilot into production. Based on the results of that first iteration of the pilot, we then take a moment to look at those results to think about continuous improvement. We need to do one, a design prototype. Do we need to go back to the drawing board and really figure out, are there some things there that we can make small tweaks around this particular prototype? We go back to the beginning of this cycle and look at the other prototype options that are available. And so it gives us an opportunity to not just focus on one specific tool, one specific methodology, but to really think about in context what opportunities that are available for our faculty, for our instructional designers, for our, all of our team members to be able to be successful in this, implement these pilots. I wanted to come back and talk a little bit about our team approach. I think one of the things I'm very, very proud of in the work that we've done here at UMUC is that we are very collaborative in the work that we do. While CILSS, the center I run, is a research and innovation center, implementing a pilot requires multiple stakeholders that all need to work together, the practitioners, the researchers, and a lot of work in partnership, as I mentioned with you earlier, with Learning Design and Solutions Department. And then very vital part of the team as we tested the effectiveness of courseware. Your LD&S department is made up of cutting-edge designers, graphic artists, folks that have thoughtfulness around how we need to be able to think through, create an opportunity to put this innovation in production. The faculty is involved in any piloting within their program. The accounting, in this example I'm going to show you today, the accounting program chair has been an essential part of the Realizeit piloting team. Really helpful for us being with our scale, they even have our IT and our support leads. So when a student calls in at UMUC, there's a help desk number. That same help desk number is the number that a student calls who's a part of our pilot. So we've equipped the team with a knowledge base to be able to answer questions specific to our piloting approach. And so I just wanted to take a moment to, demonstrate to you that it takes a team approach to be able to do this and do this well. A little bit about the pilot that we did with Realizeit. Here's our approach. We knew our problem. We knew that the national rates of completion for introductory accounting courses were around 60%. We wanted and needed to increase successful completion of a Principles of Accounting 1 course, which seemed to be an obstacle course for some in pursuing the field. And we thought, as we looked at our hypothesis, that we could possibly use Realizeit as an adaptive learning platform to be able to see how these improvements may work. So our first iteration, we used the platform, Realizeit platform, for all sections, weeks of one section of the course. We had one SME. We evaluated and then we improved. The second iteration, we had a platform that we used for all sections, all weeks of 3 sections. We evaluated and improved. And in the third iteration, we finally got to this RCT model. We got to the randomized controlled trial. So as I talked about earlier, the iterations feed into being able to talk about the empirical research, with the goal still being RCT. Give you some feedback in terms of the kind of data that we saw with our pilots. Iteration. Students find that they were in a pilot section and given the opportunity to opt out. We wanted to make sure that as we thought about our IRB and we thought about being able to make sure that students had informed consent, that they had an opportunity to opt out of the first piloting section. 2 sections, we had 1 treatment and 1 control, which resulted in a sample size of 55 students. Of those 55, 26 students used Realizeit. Looked at what we found at the end of the session, and when we did our analysis, is that we saw a significant positive effect on grade that relates to students in the treatment section. Realizeit students had grades that were 0.5 grade point higher on average. All the other variables equal, and given the small sample size, these results were promising, but we didn't have enough power. We didn't have a large enough sample size to be able to say that these results were definitive. But we stood up at the end of this cycle, and we also did interviews with the instructors and got feedback from students. The feedback that we got from students and from faculty gave us that first iteration of improvement. And what we found that first cycle was that we had some technical issues in terms of the platform and expectations around node time that we needed to go back and calibrate. So students would be, more aligned with the expectations and the workload and the cognitive load that we were asking students to be able to do in that very first sections. But again, one small section, we saw some promising results, and so we continued on the journey of the pilot. Included 2 sections of three pilot sections in the Realizeit section that used Realizeit for all 8 weeks of the course. Again, sections were fully online, and the Realizeit system was used for all 8 weeks. Sections were randomly chosen, and students were given the option again to opt out and be enrolled in a traditional online class, which is so funny to hear us start to say traditional online class. The 3 pilot sections and 3 control sections resulted in a sample size of 169 students, and them used the Realizeit system. Instructors were assigned to teach the sections before the sections were randomized, which was really important for us to be able to effectively randomize the instructors as well. This allowed us to control for any bias introduced by instructors who were more than interested in using the technology, so that we could control for any of that bias effect. Qualitative feedback from this iteration were not as encouraging. The quantitative feedback from this iteration were not as encouraging as the first iteration. The analysis on this section showed that there was no significant effect on course success when we considered the demographic and other student variables. There was no significant effect on the treatment of final grade. But as we did in the first iteration, we did interviews with instructors and feedback from students. These, however, indicated areas that might need to be improved. One of the major, it just kind of hit us like a light bulb moment was our faculty. think adaptive learning requires, or personalized learning requires, faculty to really shift their mindset in the ways in which they engage students in the course. Our findings showed us that we needed to better prepare faculty to communicate that shift that happens in utilizing adaptive learning analytics. Instructor training after the second iteration became an area of greater focus. As a result of prior to this second iteration, we gave faculty a really basic, well, realize that here are the core components, here is the promise of adaptive, here is the philosophy. But as a result of this feedback from the second iteration, we created a faculty mentor program. So faculty who had used the platform before and felt comfortable with the technology could help new instructors, encourage them to engage with the technology, answering any questions that they may have about how to solve any issues they may have. This also allowed us to test our theory that if faculty were better prepared, the student experience would improve. Well, this to be true in the third iteration of our course, and that students in the treatment section of the iteration that I'm going to talk about in just a second rated professors higher in the categories of responsiveness and provide helpful feedback and maintaining accurate course records when faculty use the Realizeit system with greater proficiency. So about this last iteration of the course. And they finally reached the goal, still the pinnacle of RCT. We were able to talk about a fully randomized control section. We had additional data points as well in multiple systems. At UMUC, we have a very robust data warehouse. We have baseline as well as end-of-course surveys to be able to give us more information. We also had the Realizeit platform usage data, which is really robust in offering a lot of data points around learning that's happening in the system. 220 was once again a randomized control trial. The trial involved 15 treatment sections and 16 control sections. The sample size was 797 students, 412 of them used Realizeit. We had all students complete a baseline survey and an end-of-course semester survey, asked for information not available through the data warehouse, hours of employment, previous use of adaptive software, things like that. Also gave us more detailed feedback on perceptions about Realizeit, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about those perceptions. The data as it related to the Realizeit system was also collected for this iteration, allowing us to see which points in the Realizeit system students were experiencing difficulty or dropping out of the system. In this third iteration, students in the Realizeit sections were more likely to successfully complete the core grade of C or higher than those in control sections, controlling for demographic variables and a measure of how many hours the students worked in employment. That is, the effect of the treatment of the course success is positive and significant. Realizeit section also had final grades that were 0.24 grade points higher, average holding all else equal. This is robust to the addition of the survey variables, such as the student's level of confidence with the technology, where they had previously used adaptive software, and how many hours they worked in paid employment. These results mirrored our first iteration, and that I shared with you earlier in the first iteration where we had that one treatment section. However, the third iteration had several advantages over the first. First, the sample size, obviously you can see, is much larger than the first sample, about 14 times actually. This means we could be more efficient and more confident in the results of our statistical analysis. Second, instructors were assigned to sections before the sections were randomized, effectively randomizing the instructors again. And thirdly, all online sections were part of the pilot and were randomized for treatment or control.
Cristi, clarification question was posed. Could you just clarify 0.24 points higher? Does that mean like a 2.5 is now a 2.74?
That's correct.
So the actual points in the grade point average.
I think I want to note on this slide is that, as I mentioned, all sections were a part of the pilot and they were randomized. This meant that all sections that ran later in the term were as likely to be chosen for Realizeit as those that ran early in the term, which was major because in the beginning of our pilot, we would have certain cutoff points. So after the third week that courses had opened, we decided to go ahead and close our piloting opportunities and then randomize those sections. Well, now we're even thinking about students who register late or students who may not be as motivated. So we were able to look at all the sections being offered. Semester surveys also gave data on any difficulties students had in the course. Their impressions about their instructors and the material that was covered. There were a few statistically significant differences between the two groups on these measures. When we asked the students to rate their instructors on responsiveness, students in the treatment group rated their instructors 0.3 points higher on a 5-point scale, like a 5-point Likert scale, on average holding all else equal. Students in the treatment sectors also rated their instructors 0.5 points higher on average, whether they're provided helpful feedback. And this one was really huge for us because what we started to be able to notice is we could triangulate in the usage of Realizeit how many students were how many faculty members were using the messages component of the system and were answering question queries, and we correlate that back to the results that we saw here. So, with that, we went back to our faculty mentors and said, okay, now that you've oriented faculty or to the system, let's talk about what is actually available to be able to kind of move the needle in terms of the responsiveness. Make sure that you're going in and you're looking at the system. Are question queried? Are you going through and telling students, great to see you working through notes. It's great to see that you've been working on these different variables. And so, that was for us that we never really, quite frankly, had before. And so we were able to leverage that as well. Talk with you about, before I kind of open it up to additional questions, last two slides, is this one here talks about students will also ask questions on the end of course survey like, would you believe that the Realizeit course was less rigorous, equally rigorous, or more rigorous than other UMUC courses that have been taken? The sample size indicated that it was more rigorous, and 46% indicated that it was equally rigorous. Logistical regression, controlling for all the other demographics and other variables, showed that being in the treatment group had no effect on perceptions on course rigor for this question. Into being asked about the course compared to other UMUC courses taken, students asked how rigorous the course compared to non-online courses taken in the past. Almost 7% indicated that the course was more rigorous than non-online courses they had taken. 8% indicated it was equally rigorous. Section of the end of the course survey questionnaire asked students who were in the treatment section about their impressions of Realizeit. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this piece here because I think it's important to note. Students were asked if they agreed with the statements about Realizeit using a 5-point Likert scale. One meant strongly agree to 5 strongly disagree. And so one of the things that I thought was really interesting as we looked at this this feedback from the item analysis, so we asked students questions like, Realizeit helped me learn the course material better. Realizeit assessments, exercises were effective. Difficulty to learning material. Increased my engagement. And we found significance on 4 of the 5 variables that were listed. And so I know sometimes we will say that self-report is not always the most accurate. But as a qualitative researcher approach, I really believe that knowing what a student believes matters. If a student believes that he or she is learning, it's likely that this will lead to the student's next action will be based on that belief. For example, signing up for additional courses. And so I think these are perceptions that have been really important for us to take on. The thing I wanted to leave you with before I open it up to any additional questions about what the work we've done so far is that, again, as I mentioned, it's iterative. And one of the things that's been really enjoyable about working with Realizeit is that they understand our need to be thoughtful from the DBR perspective and always thinking about continuous improvement. So we actually worked with the folks at Realizeit to really look at all the end-of-course survey feedback, qualitative feedback from instructors and from students, and do some thematic analysis and create these kind of buckets. So we had a design bucket for design, content, and assessments. And then kind of went through, and again, because I believe this work that we've done Realizeit has been about a partnership, we went through this collectively and figured out what was working, what was not working. And based on this iteration and this feedback that we received, we have made core curricular changes. We've thought about how do we figure out how to think about the grading formula. It needs to be simple and easy to understand for students. Or if we're looking at thinking about cognitive load and we're thinking about the nodes and how they're structured per week. Using the analytics in Realizeit has allowed us to be a lot more thoughtful and really seeing where the imbalance is, or are there areas that the alignment of the concepts and the assessment questions may not be as well aligned. We can now see in the system if there's a certain concept that, photosynthesis, if there are 15 questions in the quiz bank and 100% of the students answer all those questions wrong, well, now we know we have a problem with the assessment that we need to really be able to think about from a psychometrics perspective, that we didn't really have that level of analysis before. So, again, I think design-based research has been a great framework for us to be able to think about the iteration approach. It's been a really great framework for me to be able to talk with senior administrators about what it takes time to do the work that we've been doing, and I think it should be something that we talk a lot more about in the innovation space. Thank you.
Cristi, you are spot on timing. Nicely done. We've got a question, and I'm going to encourage folks right now to ask some questions. That came in toward the end here, Cristi, is you were talking about how you gathered student perceptions. Mm-hmm. The question is, did you also gather faculty perceptions on Realizeit? And if so, what was the takeaways from faculty?
So we did student and faculty perceptions. We did an end-of-the-course survey for faculty as well as students. Then we followed up and did some very specific feedback with faculty. In that second iteration, what we found, which is one of the reasons why we went back to think about the faculty training, is we only heard from students, but we heard from faculty that they weren't always quite sure what to do in the system and always use the system and how dynamic it was. So it told us that we had a challenge around what we had thought we'd done due diligence around preparing the faculty, that we actually hadn't done the best job that we could have. So, yes, absolutely. And so we'll also say that as we, if we sunset a pilot, these results are showing you things that have gone well. But as we sunset a pilot, things that haven't gone well in other academic innovation areas, we do a debriefing and a sunsetting process where we talk with all faculty about the process and, what worked well, what didn't work well, what should have happened differently. I'll say it's been really nice to work with Ty Manoj and the Realizeit team, and that we started to get some of the first iteration feedback from the students. We sat right back to Realizeit. We're able to say, so students are having challenges with these 5 things. Because this has been a partnership, we were able to be very dynamic and solution-oriented in figuring out what could we do to solve those.
Very good. Cristi, I have a question.
Sure.
So the goal of an innovation lab is to do experiments. It's to try new things in a controlled environment before you roll them out to the broader enterprise. Right. So that's really the strategic purpose of the center that you lead. My question is, has DBR made a significant difference versus the traditional research in terms of how you were able to more successfully get something from lab into operation, right? As the methodology or the data, how is that actually helping you to bring other stakeholders along in the university to actually get things from the laboratory into operation?
So I think it for me is, and I said for me at the onset, that it changes the conversation. No longer is an approach to just look at us as feels like we'll go off and test that thing and come back and tell us what happened. It's a collaborative approach that we have to be in constant communication with several stakeholders around. So we've seen success here. We've seen some early promise here. Here are some things we need to do differently to have a better experience for our students. And so for me, it's been really helpful because as a researcher, you're always thinking about empirical research. Well, we're educators, and so there's a possible way to control for every single variable. We're not in a controlled laboratory. experiment labs. So being able to be thoughtful about, okay, all, feedback is good feedback. Let's be very action-oriented in the type of feedback that we get and what we do with it. Because, course design is not a one-and-done thing. It's really about thinking about continuous improvement for us. So it's been immensely helpful to me.
Been so thorough that I don't have any new questions coming across the transom, so I'll open it up one more time.
Well, while you open it up, I'll share that we're going to publish a piece on this in a couple of months. We're working with the OLJ, the Online Learning Journal, through OLC. We have a submission that's due in June, so we will have a little bit more contextual, information on this topic and be able to share that out. It's helpful. I will also give a shout out to our friends at UCF. Have been very great to collaborate with, as well as folks at C2, Judy Omar. There have been a lot of folks in this specific to Realizeit that have allowed us to have this community of practice and really thinking about research in a very, applicable way.
I just got a note from my good friend, Mr. Ellis. Chris, I know you said you sent some questions to Q&A, but they haven't registered. Can you send those back through the chat line? So there were more questions, Cristi, I guess somehow they didn't come through our Q&A.
So hard hearing your voice, but it's so hard not hearing other voices in this space.
I know. I'm not sure what happened there, but if you are able to enter those in the chat, we'll be happy to ask Chris questions. And Cristi, are these slides shareable by any chance?
I can get these out to folks, and I have my Twitter handle as well as my email account up on the slide. So if there's something else that I can do to connect with people or share out more information, I'd be more than happy to do so. As I mentioned, others in this space have done so with us. So we're happy to do that.
Okay, we'll also provide that as a follow-up. Are you able to unmute? Chris, go ahead and ask your question.
All right, 3 questions there.
Okay.
Can you hear me, Cristi?
Yes.
Great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm on the very front end of an implementation here and dealing with some resistance that I would like you to talk about.
Okay.
You're from a university that has nothing but online courses.
Mm-hmm.
There's been some resistance to change to going from what method you were using, what learning management system you were using, to an active learning platform. So if you talk about 3 things, that resistance and how you overcame it. The second is your use of OER, online resources. Third is describe to me a little more the nature of the production team that you created, up with the great content and the questions that have to populate adaptive learning, if you would please. Thank you. Okay,
I will try to address all of them. So I'll say this, I'll start with this. One of the reasons why we appreciated working with Realizeit is because of our use of OERs. And we needed to work with a provider that would allow us to use our own content. And we need to work with a provider, if you know anything, Chris, about UMUC and our move to OERs at the undergraduate and the graduate level, it's very critical for us to have partners that will be able to support that. And so I realized it was a great platform for us because we could pull all of that material in. In terms of creating the material, what we started with was the course as it was, and the online course as it was. Pulled in some SMEs. We had the program chair and the assistant program chair involved in the team. We had someone from Learning Design and Solutions, an instructional designer. We found we had to spend a lot more thoughtfulness around creating assessments. We spent a lot more time thinking about chunking We had to really take some of our, content, what we already had, and repurpose it. We had a lot of great information, but it was really about repurposing it to make sure that we were going to be able to use it in a way that would allow Realizeit to be able to be, really dynamic and be able to allow students to have these multiple tasks. First question you said I wanted to, the resistance. So, I will also say to you that we are unique in that we are open access. We do have a very different model than most institutions in terms of only having, we have collegiate faculty and we have program chairs, but we have a large population of adjunct faculty that teach for us. And so for us, one of the things that really helped me make the move was came to them showing them how we're going to solve a problem that they had. So like when you go to the doctor's office, you don't just go just you want to see how he's doing. You go because you're hurting. Something's, an ailment. And so if we could contextualize and move the conversation around creating a value proposition for the department chair, for the faculty member, allowed us. And in fact, it's interesting to ask me this question, Chris, because I had a slide in here, and I took it out at the last moment this morning that talked about building capacity. In that we, so thinking about that perspective really, really key for us. And so I don't know in terms of, UMUC has been an open, access online institution for many, many years. But, I look at my colleagues like, UCF, Tom and Patsy and Chuck, and work that they're doing in building capacity in a traditional institution. I think the same, momentum and the challenge you have when you're moving people from face-to-face to online. You start building a small collaborative of people that, will be your foot soldiers or will be your folks that will be able to go tell their colleagues. We also found being able to talk with colleagues that were like-minded in like-minded disciplines. So connecting folks here with people at UCF that have the same backgrounds. Faculty members want to hear from people in their discipline. They want to hear from a mathematician, or they want to hear from a political scientist or an accountant. They don't hear from me. I mean, and not having that expertise in the field. And so those are the types of things that we historically had to do to be able to kind of build the capacity around that. Around OERs, and as I mentioned, I guess a little bit earlier, we use them for all of our courses at the undergraduate and the graduate level, and that's something that really we appreciate about the system, is that we can pull that content in.
Excellent question. Thank you. Glad we were able to get to that. Cristi, that wraps up our questions. So I, on behalf of Realizeit, want to thank you for your generous time today and all that you have shared. We're very grateful to you for that. We thank all the attendees. We had about 2/3 of the attendees, Cristi, stay through the Q&A, so that's a great thing. We will make sure that the link to the recording and the slides are made available in the next day or so, so look for that. Again, thank you all for coming to the webinar. We appreciate it, and we'll continue to do these every month or so, just highlighting different stories of different folks out there that we collaborate with. So again, thank you all. Thank you, Cristi. Much appreciated.
Thanks for joining.